right, we're live. Alex, what's going on, man?
Not much, just enjoying my time as an entrepreneur in Austin, working for myself, living the dream.
Does life get better than that?
Hopefully it does. I like to think that things continually get better. That's actually been the way that I have been able to do less work and get more out of life, is always looking for shortcuts, always looking for patterns where a lot of work can be reduced into smaller tasks that can be executed on, where greater results can come with less effort.
That really speaks to a lot of the theme of your Twitter. And for the listener, we had you on. This is actually part 2. We both had independently followed your Twitter, and we were like, this guy has just such an interesting perspective on how he approaches nutrition, dieting, life in general. You know, we have the baseball thing in common as well. So we wanted to have you on for a part 2, just to kind of go in more depth in terms of a lot of the topics that we explored in the first episode.
Yeah.
So I think for our listener, man, I think just hearing a little bit more about, your backstory, it's fascinating how you got to the point where you're at now.
For sure.
We can explore all those mental models that you have, because it's so valuable.
So I never thought I'd be an entrepreneur. I never thought I'd be a fitness coach, a life coach. It all came as a consequence of the previous step. So I grew up in the San Francisco Bay Area to, middle class, upper middle class upbringing. Went to public school, but a good public school. And at 15, 16, 17 years old, I didn't know that there was anything to do as an adult other than be an athlete, entertainer, or work a job like a corporate stiff. And I saw my parents, my friends' parents working jobs like corporate stiffs, and I didn't want to do that. And I was okay at baseball, and I convinced myself, well, if I just work hard enough, I'll be able to be a Major League Baseball player, because I didn't know any better. I just thought if I just keep working at it, I'll keep being stronger, I'll keep getting bigger, I'll keep getting faster, and my life has to work out. So I put in a lot of work in high school, a couple, 3-4 hours after school every day on the track, in the weight room, in the batting cages, taking ground balls, trying to be the best baseball player I could possibly be. And that resulted in me getting a scholarship offer to Vanderbilt University, among others. And I thought, wow, I grew up in California, but I have the opportunity to move to Nashville and play in the SEC. And this was before Vanderbilt was like the most sought after baseball program to play for. Mid-ranked RPI team, middle of the pack, even bottom of the pack SEC team. But the coaches liked me and I really liked them. I went to Nashville in 2003 to take my official visit. And I stepped on campus and the vibe was nothing like I'd ever seen before. It was buzzing. The guys were excited to be there. They were all jacked and tan. I was like, man, these guys are yoked. Like, how do I look like this? I want to look like this. I want to play here. And I ended up accepting their scholarship offer to move several thousand miles across the country to play at Vanderbilt. And when I arrived, I noticed a few things. Number one, my work harder than everyone to be better than everyone approach stopped working once I got to a level where everybody was as good as me and a lot of the people were better than me. And I noticed a lot of the frameworks that I assumed to be true, such as logical thinking and knowledge will always result in a better life outcome. I noticed that they were wrong. I noticed that I had come to the end of the road of what that mindset was going to get for me. And I had to essentially lean into my underdeveloped right side of my brain to learn how other people thought so I could compete at the level of an elite SEC baseball player and ultimately get drafted. I had to realize the human condition. I had to learn how scouts thought. I had to learn how other coaches thought. I had to learn how other baseball players thought. And that was where I realized the value of irrationality, where you notice that the most successful athletes aren't rational. They don't have rational self-assessments. They don't have rational assessments of their surroundings. They're not good at school, but consistently they'll outperform other people. And I think back to the 2 best players that I played with from a competition standpoint, I would say David Price, Ryan Flaherty, both played 8+ years in the major leagues, both first-round draft picks, neither of them very good students, but they're smart. They're just not smart in a way that's rewarded in an academic setting. But you put these guys in a competition, and it didn't matter what competition it was: baseball, poker, golf, bowling, video games. These guys would always beat everybody else on the team. And obviously they weren't recruited to golf. They weren't recruited to bowl. They weren't recruited to play video games. But something about the way these guys competed led them to always being the best and the second best out of everybody on the team. And I paid attention to that. because ultimately what I wanted out of life at the time, and I still want now, is freedom. And I realized that in order to be free, you need to pay attention to the patterns that other people don't recognize. And one of those patterns that I noticed when I was 21, 22 years old was that good-looking people get treated better in life. I noticed this when I was sitting in a finance class and we'd have investment bankers come in holding a cup of coffee, wearing a custom-tailored suit, speaking articulately. And I noticed what was going on in the back of my mind, which is I would buy anything from these people and I don't even know what they're talking about. And I thought to myself, if I'm thinking this, most likely other people are too. And when I break into the corporate world, if I break into the corporate world, I need to make sure I have every advantage I possibly can so that I can get paid money for doing the work that everybody else is going to do. And so I got done playing professional baseball in 2009. It was actually quite hard for me to break into the corporate world because I didn't have the advantage of campus interviews. So a lot of people said, hey, you should be an investment banker. I didn't know what an investment bank did. I ultimately became friends with a hedge fund manager who is also a conspiracy theorist, but he taught me how the monetary system worked. He taught me that US dollars were effectively created by a private banking cartel. And even though it was very emotionally challenging, even emotionally devastating for me to learn that the world wasn't the way it was taught to me, I took what he said seriously because he had over $100 million and I didn't, and I wanted that, and he had it. And so when he told me how the Federal Reserve was structured, I actually read the Federal Reserve Act. And I realized, okay, this conspiracy is actually true. I can spend a lunch period, 30 minutes, reading a 30-page act, and I can realize that US dollars are in fact created by a private banking cartel. Okay, knowing this, what's the next best option for me? And I realized that if dollars were created by a private banking cartel and banks were underwater following the 2008 crisis, interest rates were going to stay low for a long period of time, which was going to benefit the tech sector, which was because the tech sector was most heavily dependent on cheap or subsidized cost of capital. And so at 25 years old, 2011, I moved back home to Silicon Valley where I grew up, and I elevator pitched my way into Google. Everybody thought I was crazy, but I thought to myself, all I need to do is wear a custom tailored suit, speak well, be competitive, meet a sales hiring manager, and I'll talk my way into a job. And everybody thought I was nuts. They still do. But that's exactly what happened. I asked a Vanderbilt alum a few times, hey, can we grab breakfast? Can we grab coffee? Can we grab whatever? Third time I asked, he invited me in. All of the applications that I had sent online for the previous weeks that went nowhere were all of a sudden massively superseded by a 90-second conversation that I had with two hiring managers where I effectively talked my way into a sales job before I even had the interview to where when I had the interview, they told me in the interview that they wanted to hire me. So I spent 6 years working at Google. First year, 2 years were pretty good. I was working, making six figures for the most desirable company to work for in the world at the time. But I noticed that there were a lot of rules in place that I perceived due to my background in finance were there to benefit the shareholders at the expense of the employees, which you'll notice in almost every company. Companies are created to benefit the shareholders, to make profits. And I noticed some of the narratives were misaligned with numbers that would appear on income statements and on the balance sheet. And ultimately, I felt like I was being manipulated. And the only way out was to look to another industry or start my own thing. In that whole time, I maintained my commitment to fitness. I was always eating delicious food, had no intention of counting calories, and wanted to be in good shape so people gave me the benefit of the doubt when they met me. I happened to realize back in 2014, 2015 that there was a much easier way to lose fat than what most dietitians or personal trainers thought you had to do, which is like eat salads and do a bunch of cardio. I accidentally stumbled across a system that required a lot less effort, which was basically linked to my intuition combined with an athletic training framework. Train hard, run fast, lift heavy, take breaks so you can rest, so you can do it again. And over the next several years, I realized that, wow, it's so much easier for me to have abs year round without counting calories, without hitting the gym. If there was one thing that I could possibly do to benefit the world, it would be teach this fitness system. Of course, I didn't have a platform to teach it until crypto markets started taking off. 2017, Bitcoin went to about 20,000. I realized that my background in finance actually positioned me well to switch into the crypto space. And so I quit my job at Google, without another job lined up, scrapped on my own, fended for myself, and ultimately got a role at a crypto exchange in June of 2018. And I realized that this high-paying sales role that I have won't be there for me if I don't develop an online audience, because everybody in crypto who's anybody seems to have a pretty decent Twitter following. And so in 2019, I committed to growing my account, bought Ed Lattimore's book, and committed to creating Twitter content. And I realized that people are actually liking my fitness content a lot more than my corporate content or my Bitcoin content at the time. And so I just kept posting all these massive, ostentatious meals that I'd be eating during the day. I'd cook them in the office and cook bone marrow and all this good stuff and smell up the office. And everybody was like, what are you doing? But they gave me the benefit of the doubt because I was in good shape. And then by 2020, when COVID happened, I had a few products out. I was still working my crypto job, but I found out with my recipe book, with my fat loss guide, with my masterclass, I can make $10,000 a month selling these digital products while I have my full-time job. What would happen if I focused on it full-time? And in 2021, as crypto markets kept going higher, I was in a position where I could actually start doing that full-time. And after doing it full-time, I started realizing, as much as people follow me for fitness and losing fat, and I've helped hundreds of people lose fat, without counting calories, loving their food, loving their training, thinking it feels like cheating, I can also help people escape the corporate world because I was there. I was in their shoes. I was miserable like them. I felt manipulated like they feel, but I was able to construct a logical framework that enabled me to avoid exploitation and ultimately allowed me to escape. And so that's what I do now. I teach people how to win at life.
That's freaking badass. Was there ever a period for you where you felt like maybe you weren't meeting your potential, or have you always kind of felt this innate drive to be successful and kind of at the top of or the edge of everything that you do, like getting a job at Google, working at a hedge fund? Those are such high achieving accomplishments.
Every day I feel like I'm not meeting my potential. And that included every day as a professional athlete. Every day, since being a successful entrepreneur, by most people's standards, I consider myself underperforming. And I tweeted this out yesterday, the day before, that the most successful people that I've met have this ability to simultaneously think they're absolute failures on one hand, while on the other hand, think that they're bulletproof, in the face of adversity. And, I would attribute my success to both a combination of arrogance, as many people would define it, where I thought I was too good for my employee jobs, right? I was making six figures at Google, but I wasn't at the level that I thought I deserved to be. And I didn't think I needed to do what they said that I had to do to get promoted to where I thought I deserved to be. Most people would say that I was arrogant. I thought that I deserved to be paid more at the hedge fund that I was working at. Most people would say that I was arrogant. What did you do? And the answer was not that much, but I thought I deserved more. And so I think my arrogance in always thinking I deserved more, combined with my work ethic to prove myself right, allows me to always accomplish more. So I always think I'm underperforming, even now, even today. I always think I'm underperforming. And what that does is it allows me to move the goalposts to where when I got started on Twitter, I thought, well, if I could just make $10,000 a month working for myself, that would be amazing. Well, it's like, if I made $10,000 this next month, that would be very bad news.
Yeah.
And it's like, wow, it's only been 3-4 years since then, but the goalposts have changed because my circumstances have changed. And so I've always set myself high expectations. I've always looked at most people's standards and thought that they were ridiculously low and didn't want to apply to me. And I think after working at the hedge fund that I worked at, I came to realize that there's a very strong bifurcation between the lifestyles of successful people and the lifestyles of everybody else. The average American is obese. I tweeted out earlier today, the average American who's 40 years old, makes $55,000 a year, has $125,000 net worth, and is obese, right? That's what's going to happen if you just kind of go with the flow and set the standards that other people have set for you and just follow the leader.
Yeah.
That's exactly where it's going to go, because that's where it goes for most people. And from an early age, I said, that's not going to be me. I'm destined for more than that. And so every day when I was at Google, my first year I made $95,000 there, but every year after that I made six figures. I was frustrated. I was very frustrated that I wasn't growing as fast as I thought I deserved to be, because no matter what level you're at in life, if you're a high IQ, hardworking individual, you're always going to be smarter than the person who's attained your level of success on average.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you notice this and you have that degree of self-awareness, you'll always feel like you're underperforming. All of the most successful people I know feel like they're underperforming. I had dinner with my hedge fund boss a few years ago. I would estimate at the time, I don't know this, but I would estimate at the time his net worth might have fallen to about $40 million.
Mm.
He was a shadow of the person that I worked for. His confidence was shot. And you think, well, dude, you have $40 million. Like, what's going on?
Yeah.
But 2 years later, he made one trade that made him $150 million.
Mm.
And he wouldn't have been able to make that trade that made him $150 million if he didn't think differently than everybody else and think that he knew something that other people didn't know. So I think to succeed in life, you need a combination of the humility to learn from your failures, but the arrogance to think that you should be better than where you're at right now.
Mm. Also, when I hear your story, I feel like you have exceptional pattern recognition. And what I mean by that is whether it was playing baseball at Vanderbilt, playing baseball professionally, taking a job in corporate America, tech, nutrition, weight training, et cetera. It's like there is a set of conventional rules that society tells you, where I feel like you were able to recognize, whether it was like David Price or realizing eating more steak or identifying these different rules. This is not what society's telling me, but this is actually the thing that's going to make me successful.
Right.
Where a lot of people are just like playing the same rules as everyone else, where you realize I should actually just be playing a totally different game. That is what's going to help me achieve the success that I want to have.
I think that has to do with our education system, in that our education system is a regurgitation system, where if you simply regurgitate what's in the textbook, you're going to get an A or close to an A. It doesn't require that you actually learn the material and apply it. And as I became an adult, I realized I don't care how it's supposed to be done. I just want the best results I can possibly get with the lowest amount of effort. Oh, I happen to notice that if I don't count calories, I have better results than if I do count calories, so long as I'm eating protein-dominant real food only when I'm hungry, and I stop eating when I'm full, moderate my sugar consumption, and don't drink a ton of alcohol, and sleep decently. So yeah, I think pattern recognition is definitely important. I don't want to underplay that, because frankly, I think maybe only 5, 6, 7, 10% of people actually have the pattern recognition skills to see a lot of the patterns that we see. But of the people who have those pattern recognition skills, most people are too mentally and emotionally weak to recognize and accept the patterns that their brain is telling them. They don't want to read the writing on the wall, because, what's the implication of the food pyramid being entirely wrong? Well, it means the government either lied or is incompetent about something that's very important, right? So what's the second order effect of the government lying or being completely incapable of informing us on something that's very important? Well, do you think that's the only area, right? Like, where does it stop? And as you peel off more layers of the onion, you realize it doesn't actually stop. They don't have any idea what they're doing most of the time. They just have a lot of force behind what they do. And if you want to live the life you want to live, you have to recognize patterns for yourself. If you outsource that pattern recognition to a third party, that third party is going to convey the patterns to you in a way that's going to benefit the third party over you. So if you want to succeed on your own, on your terms, you need to be the one sorting the information for yourself.
When you're talking to someone about quitting their job, how do you manage their expectations on how long it will take them to start to feel like they're taking ownership of all the different areas of your life? Because I think when you have a job, there's just a lot of outsourcing that gets done. Like you feel pretty comfortable when you have someone just paying you a paycheck every 2 weeks.
Yeah.
So like, how do you kind of manage expectations there?
I just tell people honestly, people look at me because I have a successful business going, and they think that it's always been like that, right? And probably the fact that I'm in good shape, allows people to inflate their perception of my success, which is intended, but also it's not accurate, right? In the sense that I was frustrated for years, right? So you said I was successful working at the hedge fund. I was successful making six figures working at Google. I was frustrated every day I was there. So every day from 2010 to say 2020, so 10 years of frustration where I did not give a fuck about getting promoted, because I thought getting promoted means I'm playing into someone else's hand, right? If they want to promote me, they're going to promote me, but I'm not going to change the way I approach life so I can appease a third party that has no intention of paving the way for my future the way I do. So 10 years in corporate America, I didn't try to get promoted at all. I got promoted a couple of times at Google, but I never tried to. That was a side effect of just being competent and doing the things I said that I was going to do. But I tell people honestly, it took me 10 years to actually come up with an idea that I was confident in, that I believed in, because the last thing you want to do is work a meaningless job and then go work for yourself and you find out that nobody actually wants to pay you for anything that you do. And what, do you have to scam people? Like, that's worse. If I wanted to scam people, like a bunch of losers on Twitter, like, oh, he's a snake oil salesman. It's like, bro, if I wanted to be a snake oil salesman, I would go run a crypto exchange in the Bahamas.
Yeah.
Right. Like, there's a lot more intelligent ways to make, millions or hundreds of millions of dollars if you're willing to do unethical or illegal things than like help people get in shape and escape the corporate world. But it took a long time, and it took a lot of commitment in the sense that because I was frustrated every day, I was unwilling to say, oh, well, if I just get promoted, it's going to solve my problems. I was writing books, even as late as 2017. Every moment of my weekend, I would write this sci-fi book that is like 95% finished, but I never completed it. That was basically about a social network being embedded with artificial intelligence into people's brains, to where if it was so necessary to have this artificial intelligence implanted in your brain that if everybody else had it and you didn't, you couldn't compete with them. But it became so expensive that you either had to pay them a large percentage of your income or be served ads by them and essentially brainwashed by them. So I wrote this sci-fi book, which is eerily predictive of what's likely to happen in the next few years. I probably spent hundreds of hours doing it in 2017. I've spent hundreds or thousands of hours working on projects that never materialized to anything because it meant so much to me to be able to create something that would enable me to escape, that I was willing to do anything for it.
I don't mean to backtrack too much because I know Harry just asked that question, but I am particularly fascinated about just some of the mental models that you use to have such success at Vanderbilt, to be an all SEC player. As someone that's undersized, I don't know if there's a listener that doesn't understand baseball, like, you achieved so much relative to your genetic potential.
Yeah.
And it seems like you had my experience in college was I didn't have the mental machinery to be successful. So I basically just washed out relative to my potential, where it seems like you got to that level, recognized that there was another leap that you needed to make to become a standout baseball player, and actually made those adjustments. And a lot of them were mental. So I'd love to just learn a little bit more about, what your mindset was like, because I think even though it's baseball, it's probably applicable to someone maybe trying to monetize online or level up at work or something like that. So
yeah, maybe. I mean, a lot of the things I did mentally in baseball are, nobody says they're good. They're actually the opposite of what you're supposed to do a lot. I was nervous before every game, right? And people didn't realize that. Like, every game, I was nervous. I was nervous I'd embarrass myself in front of several thousand people. And so but I realized that as a player, if I could just be arrogant, I played better. And that's one of the things that people who, if you study successful people, you'll notice a lot of them have arrogant qualities. Now, you can't be completely arrogant because you can't learn if you're too arrogant. But what average people don't realize is arrogance is a painkiller that serves as a natural opiate that allows people to get through stressors that would otherwise incapacitate 97% of the population. So if I didn't think that I was God's gift to earth, probably I would not have outperformed my potential. It required some degree of delusional self-confidence in order for me to achieve the percentage of my potential that I achieved. And I don't know if you guys have seen The Last Dance with Michael Jordan, but I loved that documentary because when I saw Michael Jordan as a teenager, when he was, in his prime, you kind of think, oh, he's MJ, he's just the best. But as an adult, when I watched that, I realized, like, oh no, he's an athlete just like I was, just like the guys that I played with. And you hone into the mental models that he uses, and it's like, oh, this guy actually doesn't care what the truth is. He just tells himself a story that will allow himself to compete at the highest level he possibly can. And that's one thing that you notice around successful people is a lot of them are not tethered to reality, right? School wants you tethered to reality and objectivity. But being tethered to reality and objectivity only help you in certain venues. When you're in a high stress venue, you do not want to be objective and real. Because if you're performing in front of 50,000 people and millions on TV, and you're objectively aware of the consequences of your actions, there is no way that you will be able to make that shot, to throw the ball across the infield, to get a hit in a pressure situation. You have to be subjective. You have to be delusional to win sometimes.
So when you were manufacturing that arrogance for yourself in college, were you just reaffirming a lot of positive statements, like telling yourself you're the best player in the SEC, best player on the field? Was it as simple as that, or was there like a visualization component to it as well?
Well, I competed with some of the best athletes in the country. And the thing about baseball is some days an average player is going to be better than the best player. So, I played with Pedro Alvarez. He was the second overall pick of the 2008 draft, right? And every day in batting practice, he could hit the ball 100 feet further than me. But that didn't mean he played a better game than I played every game, right? So if I start 55 games and Pedro starts 55 games as an SEC player, probably 15 to 20 of those games, I'm going to have a better game than him, because that's just how the game of baseball works, right? And so if I can convince myself that, well, if instead of having a better game than him 15 to 20 out of 55 times, why can't I have a better game than him 35 out of 55 times, right? Because why not? You can do it once. If you can do it once, you can do it twice. If you can do it 15 times, you can do it 30 times. So every year going into the season, I convinced myself, I should be able to hit 400. I've hit 400 for a month. Why can't I hit 400 for 4 months, 5 months? I never did, but I always thought that it was possible. And because I always thought that it was possible, I always put the work in to materialize that most likely delusional self-belief.
The game within the game is so interesting. And we were talking about CJ Wilson before we hopped in here. He has a crazy story about how he created a game within the game against Ichiro. So lefty versus lefty. And apparently he got an autograph from Ichiro once, and it looked like a child had signed the ball.
Yeah.
So he took it personally, intentionally, so that it would motivate himself to always dominate Ichiro. And apparently he always just gave Ichiro the hardest time when he was pitching against him, because he just created this narrative for himself that, hey, I don't like this guy when he steps in the batter's box.
This guy's a child.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, and that's the thing is, particularly to cut through the stress playing in, SEC road games, right? You have a bunch of drunk fans, thousands of drunk fans yelling at you, trying to get in your head. You have to convince yourself that these people are worthless, right? Yeah. Because if you actually respect them like human to human, you're like, well, there's 7,000 people yelling at me and they're all saying mean things. What if they're right? Chances are they can't all be wrong and I'm right. That's what a realistic person would think.
Right.
Well, that's not going to work.
Yeah.
Right. So what you have to realize is these people are fucking idiots and I'm the man.
Yeah.
And that's the only mindset that you can take to cut through that stress. And if you talk to successful athletes, they're always capable of putting themselves on a pedestal and saying, none of these people can carry my jock. I'm the best. And, this applies across levels. They're always able to imagine themselves superior to their competition, particularly in baseball or hand-eye coordination sports, which is why so many of them are perceived as arrogant by people who don't understand the game. It's like, you have to be arrogant to be good at this sport.
How do you do that and stay humble? The balance between the two?
Well, if you want to win, right?
Yeah.
So for me, the most important thing was always winning. And so, I know that despite being arrogant, I'm humble because I'm able to learn from people who are younger than me, right? I'm able to learn from people who I don't think should win, but are winning. And so the most important thing for me is always get better, right? It doesn't matter how you feel, right? So if I'm doing squats, it's like, well, it doesn't matter how hard that last rep is, bang it out, bro.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter how hard that last interval is. If you're close to setting that PR, gun for that PR. And the same thing is true with mental realization, so that a lot of people don't realize that if you're capable of pushing through adversity in the gym, you should also be capable of grappling with concepts that are challenging for you. And emotionally challenging concepts that everybody comes across is being around somebody who's more successful than you, who you don't think should be more successful than you. Most people will say, oh, that's an outlier. Oh, he got lucky. Oh, he got this. Oh, he got that. But if you're real with yourself, you're like, okay, I've seen this pattern too many times to think that it's just an outlier. It can just be explained away by luck. It can just be explained away by circumstance. There's something there. And one way that I am able to take the shortcuts that I take is when I consistently see people outperform me who I don't think should outperform me, it means there's something incorrect about my framework to understand the world. And that means my framework needs to be deconstructed and then reconstructed to more accurately represent what I'm seeing around me. That's a cheat code that a lot of people don't realize. Anytime you see somebody who you think is lazy, but is also being more successful than you, chances are that person has ordered what is important better than you have, right? So they're lazier in the things that you think are important because those things actually aren't that important. And they actually get like 2 or 3 things right that you haven't even realized are important, which allows them to be both successful and lazy. So people say, oh, learn from the hardest worker. I say, no, learn from the laziest successful person, because that person will tell you what's most important to accomplish in order to be successful.
Let's take a minute to talk about some of the sponsors and brands who support the show.
Who are you thinking?
I was thinking about Carnivore Bar. What are your thoughts on Carnivore Bar?
I mean, it's unbelievable. It's an unbelievable product. We were lucky enough to have the founder, Philip Meese, on the show a few months ago, and he was able to send us a bunch of product when we started the relationship and absolutely loved it. I mean, it's minimum ingredient product, beef, tallow, salt, and then they do have a honey flavored option as well, but it's so nice to have a bar that's like 3 to 4 ingredients. And like when you're following a carnivore diet, it's really tough to find products that are in line with that specific diet,
Yeah, for me, it kind of hits like the holy trinity of what you're looking for when you're looking for food. So it's nutrient dense, it's convenient, and it tastes great. And as you said, most people who are trying to eat healthy, the convenience factor is kind of a tough part. So just being able to have something you can grab on the go, know that you're going to have that nutrition for the day, it's huge.
Yeah, and we were lucky enough, we got to actually see their factory too in Missouri, and they're just doing things the right way. I love how they offer an option for like carnivore purists where it's just beef, tallow, salt. And then they also have an animal-based option too. If you do want a little bit of sweetness, a little bit of variety, they have the honey in that option. And they're just people that are doing things the right way. They're very mission focused. They're carnivores themselves. And, we're always on the go. We're traveling. We've taken a bunch of flights together. To have a bar that has 30 grams of fat too, like that's huge from an energy density standpoint, right?
Yeah, he checks all the boxes, or the company checks all the boxes. And I just think the fact that they're sourcing from a regenerative farm as well, and Joyce Farms, just a win-win.
100%. So Carnivore Bar. So we got the affiliate link, and then it's code MAFIA for 10% off.
And then another one of our sponsors, one of our favorite farms, Holy Cow. What they're doing at Holy Cow is pretty remarkable. The relationships that they've built in the industry and how long they've been doing the grass-fed, grass-finished regenerative model is really innovative. They were one of the first people to be doing that and supplying whole foods early on. Just a great community farm, and also just the product is something that speaks for itself.
Yeah, I think number one, to your point, Harry, they're just incredible people. We got to hear them speak at the Beef Initiative conference in Colorado. We had never met them before, but just hearing Warren's story where they were following a standard American diet, he had had a heart attack, and they were just looking for answers of like, how can we actually get healthier? Do I need to be dependent on medication? And they started changing their diets to incorporating more animal foods, and he completely reversed those symptoms of his stroke. And now they're just doing things the right way. They're grass finishing their beef. They're incorporating incredible practices. They have great relationships with the animals, and they're very passionate about just like connecting directly with the customer and also educating their customer on grass finished beef.
Yeah, and I think the best part is too, they're shipping nationally and trying to reach a bigger audience. So being able to not only supply beef nationally, but also educate people on the quality of good, clean, whole foods is just, it's an incredible mission.
How much do you love their beef bacon, by the way? I know that's your go-to.
Dude, it's one of the best things I've ever tasted.
It's that good.
No, honest to God, it's so good.
Holy cow.
Yeah. One of the other farms that supports us is Perennial Pastures, another regenerative farm out of San Diego. Our experience with Kevin Munoz, the owner, we had him on the show, a young first-generation rancher who's really empowered by this movement of regenerative agriculture and really wants to be a leader in the space. I think our conversation with him was so insightful, just in terms of how mission focused he is and how he really thinks about his farm as a business and wanting it to be here 50, 100 years down the road, even though he's just the first generation of it. And I think just being able to spend time with him out in San Diego was kind of the perfect indication of that, where we got to go have a meal with him at his house, hang out with his wife and kids. Like, what an amazing person. And I think his mission focus around raising really high quality beef and restoring nutrients to the soil is just one of those rare missions that I think everyone can get around.
Yeah, he has such a commitment to really feeding the local community in San Diego, in the San Diego County, first and foremost. But he's also passionate about feeding the community around the country. So I know they've invested a lot of time, a lot of money, a lot of resources to being able to order beef in bulk on their website. So I know that they now offer quarter, half, whole cows directly off the website. They have that great ancestral blend ground beef product. So it actually has organ grinds mixed into the ground beef. So you're getting the benefits of like an ounce or so of organ meat, but because it's in the ground beef, you really can't taste it at all. And I think to your point, Harry, just another amazing person. You know, Kev was someone that he was following a paleo diet in college and started realizing, wow, when I nourish my body with real foods, I feel amazing. Had a really successful stint in tech, but realized that there was just something else that he was passionate about. So he's one of those rare cases where, you know, he put his money where his mouth is, and he's a first generation farmer, just, you know, bootstrapping this thing, raising money, and just so passionate about feeding the community. Just an amazing guy.
Yeah, absolutely. What are your thoughts on organ supplements, and what do you think about the company that supports our podcast, Optimal Carnivore?
Such a good question, man. I think organ meat is something that's gained a ton of notoriety the last few years, and for good reason. I don't want to speak for you, but I think both of us have had a ton of benefits just incorporating organ meats into our diet. I would say that, you know, we definitely prefer the raw source of organs, where we'll just, you know, chop up some liver and some heart, and, you know, there are different ways to prepare it. I think the raw source is the most nutrient dense, but, you know, we're fortunate that there are companies like Optimal Carnivore that exist that freeze dry organ capsules, so you can actually take them on the go. You know, there are a ton of times where we're traveling where we're not going to have access to raw organs. So I can throw a little Ziploc bag together of Optimal Carnivore and be good to go. And I think 6 pills is an ounce of organs, which is like the daily recommended amount that will give you a lot of those really good quality vitamins in there. So that's kind of how I think we've been using it. Did I miss anything there?
No, I think the fact that it just makes organs accessible to people, and I think that organs are generally just a food group that are underutilized when it comes to eating nose to tail. And the nature's vitamin is a perfect name for these organ foods. And I think a lot of people are pretty, in the mainstream, object to eating organ meats. But when you put it in a pill form that's doesn't taste bad, it's convenient, you can put it in your backpack. It makes things a lot easier. And I also think that just generally these brands are Optimal Carnivore is focused on making people healthier, which is just such a strong mission. And, I think liver capsules is a great way to get people thinking about their health differently.
100%. There's probably someone that's listening to this right now, and you're interested in organ meats, but the taste might make you a bit squeamish. You feel strange about eating raw foods. Maybe you cook liver and you don't like it. Maybe it has a metallic taste. I think that's also where the organ capsules play such a great role, is that you're still getting that nutrient density, but you're getting it in a very convenient capsule-like format, and it just takes away any of that squeamishness that you might have to the taste. It's just a great product. And also Richard, who runs Optimal Carnivore, he's started listening to the show really early on, and he's built his own organ supply chain and is just doing things the right way and really trying to support the right people in the space. So just proud to be associated with them, honestly.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for listening. Now we're going to go back to the show.
One of the things that you mentioned is that prior to breaking away from the corporate path, I think you were making around like 10K a month from online from some of these cooking guides and books that you had written. Is that what you recommend for clients as well, to supplement some income on the side and build up a following before they actually pull the trigger and go all in and monetizing, like through some entrepreneurial path?
Yeah. And a lot of times I don't even suggest that people go the entrepreneurial route, right? Because it's hard. Right? People don't realize that what I go through is challenging every day, but I have my athletic framework to lean on to help me right my ships. And so, as an entrepreneur, I don't have long-term contracts, right? I don't have, a single client who's paying me $150,000 a year to work with them at the moment, right? And so my ability to feed myself is dependent on my ability to sell products and have people see value enough in my coaching to want to work with me, and me see enough value in them to want to work with them. And so every day I sell a different amount than the prior day, right? So what does that mean? That means 50% of my days I'm selling less than average.
Mhm.
Okay. And it probably means 25% of my days I've spent the last 2 days selling less than my average.
Mm.
And it means 15% of my days I've spent 3 days in a row selling less than my average. Well, realize that most people would just implode. Even if things are going well, you go 3 days in a row and you're going below average, below average, below average. All of a sudden that's going to get in most people's heads, and they're going to think, well, am I actually good enough to do this? Can I last? Is this going to be something that's for me? But I always take it back to what I would do as a baseball player, because as a baseball player, half the games your batting average is going to go down, right? And a quarter of the games your batting average is going to go down 2 games in a row, and 15% of the games your batting average is going to go down 3 days in a row. And the same approach is required to get out of that, which is basically saying, what's the best approach that I can take to be successful tomorrow? Okay, irrespective of what happened the last 3 days, let me do that.
Yeah.
Most people don't have the ability to do that, right? So even if they had a better offer than me, or even if they had more value that they could convey or provide, they wouldn't be able to handle the volatility of entrepreneurship. And so for that reason, I don't necessarily advocate for everybody that they should be an entrepreneur. There's plenty of ways you can make money in a corporate job without working that hard. And a lot of people would love to do that. I just want to help people get better success with less effort than what they're presently getting.
How do you go about thinking about adaptability, but then also staying with a system that will work over a long enough period of time, but you just have to give it enough time to play itself out?
I tell people that anytime you're going to commit to something new, commit to 90 days of it, because very few things, if anything in life, will work out in its first 90 days. And what you find, the more successful you are, the more you realize that the first 90 days of anything new is almost all work with no reward. And because of that, most people quit because they're used to linear, okay, I input this much, I get that much output, and I'll continue to input so long as the output is there. That's not how rewards work in life. The way life rewards work are you put in a lot of input in the beginning, and then it feels like you're stuck, it feels like you're stuck, it feels like you're stuck, and then the wall falls down, and then everything starts to work. And so if you haven't had that first hit, if you hadn't had that first success, you wouldn't realize that there's a reason to keep going after day 45. But I remember when I started my Twitter account in February 2019, I had 200 followers after like a month. And I took the same approach to building my account as I took to approaching a fitness system, which is progressive overload, right? And I remember tweeting, too bad I delete all my old tweets, but I remember tweeting in like March or April of 2019, I have 200 followers. I could quit now. It would be very easy for me to say, what's the point of this? But all I'm going to do is try to get more followers today than I got yesterday. If I got 6 followers yesterday, I want to get 7 followers today. If I get 7 followers today, I want to get 8 followers tomorrow. Guess what? That's exactly how I approach training, right? If I squatted 315 last week, I want to be able to squat 320 in 2 weeks, right? I'm not trying to squat 1,000 pounds in 2 weeks because that's impractical. But I know that if I can just make incremental progress week over week, month after month, good things are going to happen. Most people can't handle the ups and downs. They want to see success too quickly, and they're incapable of overcoming the adversity or effectively foregoing dopamine long enough and sustaining effort long enough to get that rush of dopamine at the end when everything starts to come together.
So most people don't even have the opportunity to compound their own success because they can't make it to that 90-day framework, right? Yeah. So that's the number that you've picked for yourself and clients.
It just seems to work like that. Like you think about a diet, you think about like a lifestyle change. It's, some people say, oh, it's 3 weeks of like habit building. Maybe, but I've not really found anything. Actually with the workout system that I have, I found out within 2 or 3 weeks that, hey, this works a lot better, but it was an accident. I didn't try to do it with the intention of it resulting in a bunch of fat loss. It like accidentally resulted in a bunch of fat loss. I took note of that. So in that case, it was much easier for me to just do it. But I had been working out for years before then, like not really making any meaningful progress and not thinking that I could, but just realizing like, okay, I need to do a certain amount of work to just pay the rent on my body.
Yeah.
And I'm okay with this kind of being my ceiling, even though that was a false ceiling. But yeah, like nothing good happens right away. And if you can't sustain the challenge of building that foundation, your house, your mansion will never get built.
One of the things that you've talked about is that not everyone is cut for entrepreneurship. So I'm just curious, for someone that's listening to this episode, that's in a corporate job, they don't see themselves making the transition over to entrepreneurship, but they're not as happy as they could be in that corporate job. What are some frameworks or maybe a mindset that you think they could start to implement to make them more effective and maybe work smarter, not harder, like you talked about?
Understand market dynamics. So when people say they hate their job, what they really hate is the lack of leverage that they have in their job. And they probably don't realize that their job has been explicitly constructed to minimize their leverage. By that, I mean, particularly at large companies, the organization is created like Legoland, where they don't have, it's not like, oh, we like Brett because he can do 50 different things. We like Harry because he can do 30 different things. It's like, no, we want one person to do one thing. Because if that person leaves, we can go on LinkedIn and find one person who makes $45,000 a year to do that thing. Rather than pay one guy $500,000 a year to do 12 things, we're going to pay one person $20,000 a year to do one thing, and we're going to pay 12 of them. It's just easier to price things out like that, and then they have no leverage. And so your corporation has most likely been designed to commoditize the work that you do for it to minimize your bargaining power and the salary that they pay to you. So once you realize that there's no position in life that is desirable when you have no leverage. Does anybody like going to the DMV? No. Why? Because you have no choice. You have to go to the DMV. You don't have, there's nothing you can do if you want a driver's license other than wait for their BS, right? Does anybody like dealing with airlines? No. Why? Because they're a cartel. There's only like 6 you can choose from. If there were 600, I can guarantee that your in-flight experience would be much better. Does anybody like dealing with Comcast? No. Why? Because there's only like 3 alternatives. And so if you realize that the most frustrating positions that you can be in life are positions where you don't have choice and you're constantly being funneled into positions where you cannot express unique value, you realize that if you want to be successful, you need to find a company that values you for the unique value that you provide, which is going to likely be a smaller company. And if you're valued for the unique value that you provide, what that means is you're irreplaceable. And so if you're irreplaceable, that means you can take a day off of work to go see your kid play a baseball game if you want to, right? Yep. If you're not irreplaceable, then you can't. You have no bargaining power, right? So you need to figure out how to do something that cannot easily be replicated. Otherwise, your bargaining power will be eroded. Your sense of sovereignty, your sense of agency will dissipate, and you will ultimately be unhappy.
What sort of skills would you tell someone who's in their early 20s to start developing if they have this idea in their head that they want to be an entrepreneur one day?
Try to start making money, right? It's not that hard to put an offer out, right? And what you realize is it's actually hard to give things away, right? So people think, oh, I can just start this business. It's like, I don't know. Here's a box of protein bars. Go try to give them away. See what happens. You try to go give a box of protein bars away on the street, probably 2/3 of people will be like, what the fuck is this? Like, why do I want this protein bar? So you realize like it's actually not easy to give things away. You need to figure out a way to inspire desire from you need to build an audience and then inspire desire from that audience and then create an offer that they want. And then once you do that, the more you do that, the easier it is to do a second and third and fourth time.
Do you remember what course or book had the most success for you early on?
I don't read that much.
No.
That's the thing is people say, oh, that you said this and it sounds like it came from Sapiens or it sounds like it came from this or that. And it's like, I just pay attention to how the real world works. And I try to create mental models that are predictive of what happens around me.
Yeah.
And I believe in evolution. I believe in evolutionary psychology. I believe the things that we think are not thought because they're true. They're thought because they position us to replicate and procreate. And so once you realize that your thoughts are not actually meant to approximate reality, they're meant to distort reality in such a way that maximizes your chance of survival and procreation, the whole game changes. You realize that your brain actually isn't this objective measurement system that you believed it to be, and your brain will lie to you.
Yeah. I feel like your Twitter account is basically this massive like summation of information that everyone is thinking and they know they need to hear, but they don't necessarily want to hear because you've been programmed to not say it because it's like not polite or not socially acceptable or something like that.
Yeah. And
Right?
and what I tell people is I realized when I started believing in conspiracy theories at 22 years old that I need to be in good shape.
Mhm.
Because if you have divergent thoughts, you need to be aesthetically pleasing. Otherwise, people just think you're a joke,
Mhm.
right? And so, think about two people. One person believes that there's a Federal Reserve conspiracy, and the guy looks like a slob, and the other person looks jacked and tan,
Mhm.
right? Well, one guy might be annoying, but you're still gonna maybe listen
Yeah.
to him, and the other guy you're just not gonna take seriously.
Yeah.
So, which guy do you want to be if you're gonna have divergent thoughts?
Mhm. It sounds like learning from this hedge fund manager at a young age was an incredibly unique experience that not a lot of people have access to when they're 22, 23 years old.
I think so. Yeah, like learning from a jaded, wealthy corporate executive who achieved far more success than your average VP or managing director. Because your average VP or managing director who people will go to for mentorship will tell you to play the corporate game because that's what they did. Most people pitch their own playbook,
Mm.
right? And this guy actually succeeded on Wall Street, but he was like, no, this is a scam. Don't do that. And he told me exactly the way that he perceived it, but it took a lot of mental strength for me to actually acknowledge that what he said was likely true in many instances. Now, I didn't believe everything he told me because, I think for myself, and some of the things he said, I just didn't really find evidence of that. And you don't need to be right about everything to be successful. You just need to be right about a few key things. And so I realized his perception may be skewed as well. But he's good at what he's good at. Let me find value in what I can find from him. And how can I best play this hand now that I've learned it? Oh, okay. Corporations are scams. Okay. So if corporations are scams, well, I'm still dependent on them for money. So how do I navigate this world understanding that everything is set up to manipulate me and take advantage of me? Oh, okay. Don't celebrate promotions. Okay. Because if I celebrate promotions, that means I'm bought into the system more. I understand basic human psychology. I understand how hazing mechanisms work. I understand how leverage points work. And I don't want them to have more leverage over me.
Mm.
So celebrating a promotion, in my view, is one way that you can give your company leverage over you, which really minimizes the likelihood that you're ever going to escape.
Mm. How would you go about prioritizing personal development skills, like whether it's just getting in shape physically or, getting your financial book in order? Like what sort of things are you prioritizing first above all else?
Well, you got to be fit and you got to have money, right? Those are the two most important elements for sovereignty, right?
Yeah.
You need to have your health and you need to have money, right? So if you're not doing something that ultimately benefits your pocketbook or your waistline, it better be really fucking fun.
Yeah.
At the very least,
Yeah.
right? And I'm okay with, it's not like I don't eat cookies. It's not like I don't eat cake. It's not like I don't spend money on dumb things. It's just not my habit. Habitually, I want to find value in what I eat, meaning I want to eat protein dominant real food. And if I deviate from protein dominant real food, it better taste really fucking good.
Yep.
And I better be really craving it. And it only happens once every few months. Oh, I really want that milkshake. Fine, have it. You have 4 a year, it doesn't matter. Oh, I really want to buy that cool gun. It's like, okay, buy it. Like you go buy one of those things a year. It costs like $700. Like, great. It's when it's a habit where you're like, oh, I got to buy this. I got to buy that. I got to eat this. I got to eat that. That's when things spiral out of control. But if you have a general framework, right? Like you can become a millionaire without having a budget. You can have 6-pack without counting calories. It all has to do with, is your intuition aligned with making replicable, intelligent choices, right? Are you doing essentially a cost-benefit analysis or an intuitive cost-benefit analysis? This is a good use of my money, probably not a good use of my money. This is a good use of my meal, probably not a good use of my meal. And if your intuition tells you to spend money in the right places most of the time, to eat the right things most of the time, you don't need to have a hyper-complex tracking system to ensure you're on track. The results will speak for themselves if you give them enough time.
Well, I think part of the reason why your brand is so strong in regards to nutrition is you can just tell that you're genuinely having fun and enjoying every single meal that you're eating when you take pictures of it. Where you'd mentioned this before, so many people think, oh, salads, white knuckling, restriction.
Right.
Where you're like, no, I enjoy every meal. It's delicious. It's protein dominant. And it's keeping me from even needing the milkshake. Or maybe I'll have it every once in a while, but I don't beat myself up because I know that I'm on track 99% of the time.
Well, and that's the thing is like people who haven't sustained success they think that success needs to be hard.
Yes.
And what you realize when you're successful in life with enough things is winning is actually easier than losing.
Yeah.
And that's a really, really hard thing for people to get. But think about like, if you, we've all gone on dates. We all like wanted to go out with a hot chick.
Yeah.
Right. Hopefully some of us have hooked up with a hot chick, and
Hopefully.
we've all failed to hook up with a hot chick.
Yeah.
And if you've succeeded hooking up with the hot chick and you failed hooking up with the hot chick, ask yourself which one was easier, right?
Mm-hmm.
Almost always easier to hook up with the hot chick than to fail hooking up with the hot chick. And it's because something about your approach was right. And so that's the thing, is when your approach is right, it takes less effort, right? When you're hitting a baseball, does it hurt more to hit a home run or does it hurt more to hit a ground ball?
Ground ball.
Yeah, because when you hit a home run, it's perfect, minimal vibration, everything's working in flow. And I feel like, with American culture, we think, oh, harder's better, harder's better.
Yes.
It's like, for some people to a degree, like you need to apply a hard swing on the ball to hit a home run, but ultimately it's the efficiency of your movements that dictate your success, and the efficiency of your decisions that dictate whether you can replicate them over and over again. And so, the results that I've seen in fitness, they really feel like, I'm earning interest on a bank account where it's like, what's harder, making $300,000 a year by owning $10 million of stock that pays a 3% dividend, or grinding your ass off doing sales, making $800 a day doing sales? Like, it's easier to have $10 million that's paying you a 3% annual clip than it is to make $800 a day.
Yeah.
The same thing is true with fitness. If your approach is in line with what will generally result in success, you can lose 20 pounds in a year without feeling like you've lost 20 pounds a year. I just started working with an ex-major leaguer in the middle of January. So we've been working together for like 5 weeks, right? He's already done like 15 pounds. He's not doing anything harder than he was before. All we're doing is reorienting his effort, reorienting what he cares about, right? So if you're trying to tune up your golf swing, you're trying to tune up your baseball swing, very rarely is a coach going to say, well, you're not successful because you're not swinging hard enough. That's just not how it works, right? You're usually not successful because you're applying effort in the wrong areas. And so that's the way I try to approach life, is I try to say, well, I only have this amount of effort that I can actually give. It's just not practical for me to think that I'm going to give more effort than that. So these are the confines that I'm working with. These are my limitations. And that's exactly how I approach training. I'm not willing to work harder. I'm only allowed to work smarter based on those parameters. What can I figure out with my diet? I'm not allowed to sacrifice taste in a meal if I can get more ribs. I've never done that. I've never said, well, I really want to eat this food, but I can't eat it because I want to get ripped. I'm always like, what ingredients can I replace it with so that it does less damage to me and I can enjoy it, right? And that's why I can eat pizza 10 times a month. That's why I can eat burgers 10 times a month, tacos 10 times a month, fried chicken whenever I want, right? It's not because I'm avoiding these foods. It's because I've thought through, okay, how can I construct them in such a way where they taste identical to the thing that I'm not supposed to eat, but don't do damage to my body?
And you're also, go ahead.
Go for it.
I was going to say, you're also eating a lot of these quote unquote junk foods, but you're cooking and prepping it, which is a lot of people screw up, is they're like, oh, well, I can't have pizza. It's like, no, you can have pizza, but try making it on your own. So you're controlling all the inputs. You're cooking with a good quality fat. I think a lot of people screw that up.
Yeah, I thought like 10 years ago, it's like, well, what is pizza? Pizza's bread, tomato sauce, cheese, and meat. It's like, well, do you eat bread? Most people do. Would you eat cheese? Most people do. Would you consider tomatoes to be an unhealthy food? Most people wouldn't. Would you consider meat to be an unhealthy food? Most people wouldn't. It's like, okay, so what exactly about pizza is unhealthy? And I just thought about it. Like, what about pizza is unhealthy? Well, it's probably the macronutrient proportions that pizza is generally made with when you buy it from restaurants, and probably the ingredients that they put in there. So what happens if I try to put 12 ounces of meat on a pizza and don't have soybean oil in the sauce and eat it when I'm hungry and stop eating it when I'm full? Oh, I can be ripped year round. Great. I'm going to do that. That's it. Same thing with burgers. Same thing with tacos. It's like when you go get tacos from Taco Bell, it's like each taco might have like 8 grams of protein or something like that. when I'm making my tacos, each taco is going to have 3 ounces of meat, 3 ounces of ribeye, right? So I'm getting maybe 2 grams of protein in the tortilla, 15 grams of protein in the meat, and 3-4 grams of protein in the cheese. So each one of my tacos has 20 grams of protein to maybe match 20 grams of carbs. Well, guess what? Like, I'm not a big macro guy, but I know that if my carbs nearly approximate my protein, or my protein nearly approximates my carb consumption, I can basically eat without counting calories or counting macros closely if I just stop eating when I'm full.
Yeah.
That's the amount I should eat.
Were you ever a calorie counter?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, that's how I got bigger when I went to college, is I was like, oh, calories. I gotta eat like 4,000 of these if I want to gain weight. And I gained a bunch of weight my senior year of high school, but it was very stressful for me because I was always, oh, am I eating enough? Am I eating enough?
Yeah.
And I realized first in college, but then later in my late 20s that, if I just kind of eat when I'm hungry, I can keep all the muscle mass that I have, and I'll actually lose a bunch of fat. So instead of like trying to track all this stuff, why don't I just eat when I'm hungry and stop eating when I'm full?
Yeah.
And see what happens. Oh, those results are good enough. Great. I don't need to try harder. Fine.
Yeah. It's amazing how the body actually responds to protein dominant real foods too. Like I remember in college, we all trained almost every single day, 5:30 a.m. workouts, drinking your pre-workout, protein shakes, but you're not really eating real food.
Right.
So you're training all the time, but you're not necessarily seeing all those benefits. Now it's like I train a lot because I enjoy it more for the mental benefit. But like when you're eating a lot of steak and chicken and fish and things like that, you could get away with training 2-3 times a week and looked as ripped as you've ever looked.
Not just get away with it. Like when people get away from the calorie counting framework. So to backtrack, I think it's going to be increasingly obvious in 5 years that fat loss is primarily hormonal, right? People think, oh, fat loss is about an energy deficit. And if you have enough energy, if you burn more calories than you're taking in, you'll lose fat. It's like, well, I mean, that's true, but you burn 80% of the calories you burn outside the gym. So everybody's trying to focus on the 20% of the calories that you burn in the gym. What about the 80% of the calories that you burn outside the gym?
Yeah.
Right? What if you can burn fewer calories in the gym that allow you to burn more calories outside the gym? Would you take that trade, knowing that probably at best 20% of your calories are burned in the gym? So what happens when people who train all the time, you train 5, 6, 7 days a week, you're burning a lot of calories in the gym, but very frequently it's at the expense of the calories you burn when you're sitting down, right? So if my resting metabolic rate's about 2,600 calories, it means like if we've been podcasting for an hour, I've effectively done the work of running a mile, right? Even though I've been sitting down talking to you guys, right?
Yeah.
And that's a result of how I train. Now, if you actually summed up the amount of calories that I burn training per week, I'm probably burning about 800 calories per training session 3 times a week. So I'm burning 2,400 calories about in my workouts. If you divide that by 7, on average, I'll burn 350 calories per day, right? But I'm eating 3,500 calories per day, right? How am I able to do that and stay lean? It's not because of the amount of calories I burn in my training. It's because of what I do in my training that results in me burning more calories outside my training. It means I'm focused on getting faster. It means I'm focused on getting stronger. And what those things do is they require me to rest more. And once you realize that rest is a foundational component to increasing your gym productivity, you can find that you can get even better results training less.
And then the other components to the hormone aspect of health is getting enough sleep, sunlight. Is there anything else that comes to mind for you that you try to prioritize?
Well, sleep, sunlight, training, actually helps regulate your hormones. I find that it's a lot easier for me to regulate my appetite when I do train intensely.
Yeah.
And so this is one of the challenges that I have with general training that people do is if you're training 5 days a week, 6 days a week, you can't train that intensely because your body's just never recovered enough to train intensely. So if you want to maximize your hunger, train moderately hard almost every day. That will make you the hungriest, but it'll also make you eat back all the calories that you burn, right? The body doesn't work linearly. I tweeted this the other day. I think most people should be doing conditioning before they lift. And everybody's like, what do you mean? You're going to get tired. It's like, the body doesn't work like that.
Yeah.
Like your energy doesn't just dissipate linearly from minute 1 when you're in the gym. You can actually do a hard 10 to 15 minute interval session and have more energy for your lift afterwards. So you're not only getting your cardio out of the way, but you're actually putting yourself in a position to have a better lift. So tell me what's wrong with that.
Yeah.
And, and the same thing is true with how your body responds to training in the gym. If you train at 90%, 85% capacity, you're probably going to be hungrier than if you train at 95% capacity. And so that's all, my training is all oriented around how do I have high intensity training sessions. Now, obviously not every session is high intensity. I do deload, I give my body breaks, but I want to have as many productive workouts as I can. Often that's 3, right? I can't have 4 productive workouts in a week, right? Because then I can't recover from them. But if I can have 3 productive workouts in a week, I'm going to have better results than somebody who has 2 productive workouts in a week. And I'm going to have better results than someone who has 4 workouts in a week, right? And what that does is it curtails my appetite. It helps regulate my appetite better. And there has to be some sort of, and I don't know this, but there has to be some sort of downstream hormonal regulation, leptin, something is going on, because anytime I stop doing that, my hunger gets dysregulated. I'm not capable of eating as intuitively as I normally am.
So that's almost like a framework or a check for you, is if you are able to actually train 4 or 5 times a week, that actually means that you're not training intensely enough to see the benefits that you're talking about.
Kind of. I mean, the proxy that I actually use, and it depends on age, because I trained more when I was younger and I could do it and I could get good results from it. But I think generally speaking, most people should average about 1 workout a week that they don't want to do. Because if you have no workouts a week that you don't want to do, you're probably not working out enough.
Yeah.
And if you have 2 or more workouts a week that you don't want to do, you're probably working out too much. So the Goldilocks middle of the road there is like, if you have 1 workout a week that you don't want to do, maybe you're working out 2 times, maybe you're working out 3 times, maybe you're working out 4 times, but that's about the right amount of times for you, based on your sleep, based on your stress, based on your workload, based on the quality of food that you're eating. Like, your body's probably going to tell you that's about the right amount.
What does that workout look like for you? The one that you dread or like don't look forward to every single week?
The workouts are the same. It's just my recovery leading up to it, right? Because, and this is something that I ask the people who I train, on a private coaching level, is, the 2 things that I want to check up on every week are, does anything hurt? Right? Is there any joint pain? Because obviously, if your joints are hurting from certain exercises, we don't want to continue programming them, and that requires an adjustment. How are your energy levels? Because if you're doing an effective program, at some point your energy levels are going to drop, and you're going to need a deload from that. But I'm not going to know what that is. I mean, I can look at your training output and guess, but I want you to tell me, oh, I felt real tired last week. Well, guess what? We're not going to train you that hard next week. Because if we try to train you hard on the back of a week where your energy levels are dipping, all that's going to do is dysregulate your endocrine system. It's not going to be good for you. We're going to dial down your training so you can recuperate, so that the following week we can hit it hard.
What do you think about wearables and things like, tech things that people can use for optimizing performance?
I started wearing one about a month ago, like a Fitbit, just to do sleep tracking, because one of my friends, clients, who's also a doctor, suggested that I wear it. Realistically, my girlfriend said that it sounded like I had sleep apnea. And it's just like, okay, do I go to a sleep study? He's like, you just do a wearable. It turns out it was probably the amount of edibles that I was eating before I went to sleep, which I cut out after that. And so I've found, like, I look at my sleep score and it's like, yeah, I would have guessed that. Like, I can just guess what my sleep score is and it's right. Now, I'm going to be more in tune with my body than the next person. But somebody who's highly in tune with their body will be able to better calibrate their response to being fatigued than what these wearables can tell you now. Maybe 5 years from now, 10 years from now, the wearables will be better. But right now, all these wearables do is they approximate how you're feeling. How you're feeling is not random. Like, you feel confident for a reason. You feel tired for a reason, feel fatigued for a reason. And once people realize that there's some degree of validity in their biofeedback, particularly when their schedule is consistent and their routine is consistent, they can learn from that. And then that's when they can get better results applying less effort, as you listen to what your body says. You're like, oh, yeah, working out hard today is probably not a good idea.
Yeah, that's such a good point. It's like the balance between knowing that the watch or the wearable can get you some great data. But a lot of people are so married to that data where it's like, oh shit, Whoop told me my recovery score is bad, so I'm not going to train today. Or you just get so in your own head about the recovery score, your HRV.
Yeah.
Like you should have an intuitive understanding of how you actually slept and still be able to go out and live your life accordingly.
Right. Like I basically have 3 different modes that I go to in the gym. And the mode is terrible recovery. So let's just get a C-level workout in, get some sweat in, have my body, going through the motions, but like literally like doing the movements so that I can keep the mobility from the movements, but not straining myself. Kind of B-level workout where I want to push it to where I'm uncomfortable, but not beyond that, because if I push it beyond that, it's going to delay my recovery so that the next time I can get an A-level workout will be pushed out so far. Or, hey, I'm feeling A-level right now. Let's crush it. Right. And so I just have basically 3 levels of workouts, like low level maintenance, slight discomfort maintenance, and let's push PRs.
And you're just adjusting the weight on those, usually the same workout?
Yeah.
Is it typically a normal distribution for you in terms of how often those types of workouts come into play?
Yeah, probably. But they come in waves too.
Yeah.
So, if I'm crushing sleep one week, like I might have back to back A-level workouts. But then obviously that's going to eventually I got to have to pay the piper and like rest from those.
Yeah.
But I've found like I've set PRs running miles the same day I've set PRs bench pressing. So I remember back before my shoulder got all jacked up, I ran 3 miles at a 5:47 pace and turned around and bench pressed 245 10 times 30 minutes after. Right. And it's like you can stack if you're feeling good, you might as well just do things.
Yeah.
Right. You don't have to, like today I'm just going to do this. And it's like, no, you're feeling good. Not that many days you feel great. So just crush it.
Yeah. How do you think about approaching just training, recovery, nutrition as you start to age?
We have to do less.
Do less.
And that's the thing that really, really gets people in trouble when they have a calorie-based belief system, is because they think that, if I'm doing less, I'm burning fewer calories. It's like, well, if you're doing it with more intentionality, with more intensity, you could be burning more calories. And the reason why I'm able to eat as much as I eat is because it allows me to train harder. And that's the thing that people don't get is, give me 2 people. One person's going to be well-fueled for a workout and one person's not going to be well-fueled for a workout. Who's going to get a better workout in? Right?
Person's well-fueled.
Who's going to look forward to doing that workout next week? Right? Who's going to have a higher resting metabolic rate? Right? Food is like debt, right? And the average personal finance executive coach will say you need less debt because the average person needs less debt. But that doesn't mean the smartest people need less debt. If your debt is being used to generate cash flow, it's productive debt. If your food is being generated to fuel powerful workouts, it's productive food. So this is where I firmly disagree with all these people. Oh, if you want to lose fat, you need to be in a calorie deficit. It's like, maybe you do, but you don't need to try to be, right? I've been in a calorie deficit for years without trying to be. I just wanted to have intense workouts. All I wanted to do is have better workouts. And the end result was I would gain muscle and lose fat at the same time, right? And that's the other thing that's not supposed to happen if fat loss is purely predicated upon calories in, calories out. You're not supposed to be able to gain muscle and lose fat at the same time. But there's been studies on people who all they did was improve their sleep. And guess what? The cohort that improved their sleep both lost more fat than the cohort that didn't improve their sleep, and they gained muscle while they did it, right? So if you can improve your endocrine system, you can violate a lot of these quote unquote laws of thermodynamics, right? Put somebody on steroids, that person can lose muscle or gain muscle and lose fat at the same time, right? Well, if there's something you can do to your own system that can mimic these anabolic effects, such as sleeping more, do you not think that you too can do that?
What's your take on fasting and hot cold therapy? Are you a proponent?
Fasting. So, one of the challenges with what I do is I eat a lot. And so that does mean my digestive system is pressed a lot. And so with any approach to fitness, there's going to be pros and there's going to be cons. Now, from a metabolic standpoint, I need to eat a lot in order to train hard. I like to train hard, right? I'm not approaching life in a way where I'm like, well, what do I need to do to live to 100? I'm approaching life like, I'm relatively healthy. I like training and I look good with my shirt off. So I'm just going to keep doing that.
Yeah.
There's things I do in the gym that are not positive for my long-term longevity, right? I do conventional deadlifts because I like doing conventional deadlifts. I don't really program those typically for my clients because is the risk worth the reward on those? Like probably not, but I like doing them. So I do it. With the amount that I eat, your digestive system has to process all that food. And so if I ate 30% less, my digestive system would have to process 30% less stuff. And so, I might end up getting myself in trouble if there's some things in my diet that aren't good, just because I'm going to be eating 30% more than the next guy. And maybe that doesn't make me fatter, but it could do something to my gut lining. So, my diet certainly isn't perfect, right? If I'm slightly gluten intolerant and I just like eating pizza, I'm going to keep eating pizza, right? So fasting, I do think that it's important to, give your digestive system a rest. Do I fast? No, I don't, because I like to train hard, and fasting is not really productive if you want to train hard. Hot and cold therapies, I would like to do them more. I've done them briefly. I've achieved all my success without doing them. But at 36, about to be 37 years old, I am looking for different ways that I can lower my cortisol and improve my sleep. Because if you want to get the effects of anabolic steroids, improve your sleep.
Yeah.
So if I can use cold therapy in such a way that it's going to improve my sleep by lowering my cortisol levels, maybe lower my resting heart rate, yeah, I could probably do it. And that's the thing that people need to realize about fitness systems is nobody's system is perfect, myself included. Every approach has pros and cons. You look at any influencer, any guru who seems to have it figured out. There are certainly gains that they're leaving on the table, because do you really think 20 years from now, they'll be doing exactly the same thing, knowing what they'll know in 20 years? Probably not. Right?
Yeah.
We just compare ourselves to each other. But the reality is the most successful people are probably only doing 4 out of 5 things right.
Yeah.
We just don't know which those 4 out of 5 things are. We don't know which things we can get wrong so that we can get other more important things right yet. We haven't figured that out.
There are a lot of people in the carnivore and low carb community that say that nutrition vastly outweighs your training. And I'm curious if that's something that you agree with or disagree with, or do they both just have their own place?
They're the same. They're
same.
related.
Yeah.
Right. So that's saying, is a mother more important than a father? It's like, you kind of need both.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Because people say you lose fat in the kitchen. And, I've made money selling my fat loss framework. I've made money selling my recipe book. Right. And people have had a lot of success simply following the way I eat and following the way that I cook. Right. Yeah. I'm not going to take away from that. But it's a lot easier to adhere to these principles when you train effectively.
Yeah.
Right. So effective training makes it easier to follow a consistent diet. So yeah, if I'm working with somebody who's 50 pounds overweight and I'm like, okay, what's the easiest thing we can do? All right, well, most likely I've seen people lose 20 to 30 pounds just eating protein dominant real food without even working out.
Yeah.
Okay, we're going to have them do that. But if you want to get sub 15% body fat, you're not going to get there sustainably through dieting. It needs to be through training. It needs to be through improving your force output. So it really depends on your audience. If you want to be leaner, if you want to not be obese, if you want to not be very overweight, you can do that with diet alone. But if you want to be ripped, there needs to be a training component to it. It makes dieting, or there either needs to be a training component or some degree of unsustainable dieting that I don't coach. I will never tell somebody to go on an unsustainable calorie deficit. I don't even talk about calorie deficits with the people that I coach, because I think it forces you to focus on the wrong North Star.
What sort of pushback do you get from clients most often when it comes to health and nutrition?
Well, if they're paying me, they probably subscribe to what I'm putting out there. But let's say on Twitter, what do I get pushed back on? It's people who see exponential systems linearly, and that's really in life. Is the average person sees everything linearly. Oh, well, if you do conditioning before you train, before you lift, you can't lift as hard. So you tried it? Oh no. Well, how the fuck do you know?
Yeah.
Right? Why don't you try it first and let me know? So people think that they know how my system works. And, I ran a sale yesterday on my eating framework, and somebody was like, well, yeah, but all it is a calorie deficit. And I'm like, Do you realize I made 80% of my progress without even knowing what a calorie deficit is?
Yeah.
Like, yeah, if you want to track calories all the time, there's plenty of coaches who can tell you how to track calories. Now, they can't tell you how to do it accurately because nobody can actually track calories accurately because food labels are wrong and you don't actually know how many calories you're burning at rest.
Yeah.
But that's another story. If people wanted to count calories, they would know it by now. A lot of people have had success counting calories. It's just not something that I want to do. It's not something that a majority of people want to do. And so, if it's not something that a majority of people want to do, then we need to create frameworks that help people effectively achieve the quote unquote calorie deficit without even counting calories, which can be done. Right? People don't realize like you can accomplish a goal without that being your primary goal. You can become a billionaire simply trying to create products that benefit people.
Yeah.
Right. Whereas if you just say, well, I want to be a billionaire, like that doesn't mean you're going to have a better likelihood of becoming a billionaire than the guy who says, I just want to create products that help people. Yeah. And the same thing is true with fitness is, you can have one person who says, I'm going to do anything I can to be ripped. And you can have another guy who says, I just want to get as strong as fast as possible.
Yeah.
Who's going to be more ripped at the end of 3 years?
Yeah.
I'm going to bet on the guy who wants to get as strong as fast as possible.
Right.
100%.
Absolutely.
Yeah, man. Well, listen, we always learn a ton from you. Your unconventional but incredibly effective frameworks for life, business, nutrition. It's like you're the type of person where it's like you want to just keep the conversation going because there's so many questions that we can always ask you, and you always have amazing answers. So we appreciate you coming in to do part 2 in studio.
Absolutely.
And we'll have to grow up some steaks very soon.
Let's do it. Let's drop some comments below. We'll do round 3.
Love it.
For anyone who's listening, audio only, we are all 3 shirtless right now, by the way. I don't think we addressed that at the beginning.
We're wearing
of the podcast.
pants, though.
Yeah, we are.
We're wearing pants.
No pants for round 3.
Yeah.
No. Cool.
Love it.
Thank you,
Thanks,
man.
Alex.
Thanks, bros.